The bleeding moon, over desolation. The wind didn't howl, it screamed. It tore through the ravine of forgotten thrones, like something clawing its way out of the earth itself, carrying with it the scent of ash, ancient stone, and something else. Something that made the air taste like copper and shadow. She felt it before she heard it. The healer moved through the blizzard with the practiced stillness of someone who had learned long ago that the wild respects only those who do not beg. Her cloak, weathered linen the color of old bone, whipped against her legs as she navigated the narrow path between ice-slicked rocks. No one walked these ravines anymore. Not since the Shadow Wars. Not since the royal packs had claimed their territories, and those without bloodline or brotherhood were cast out to fend for themselves in the margins of the world. She had no pack. Never had. The solitude had become her skin. The sound came again, a trembling, almost a vibration rather than a true cry. It cut through the wind's violence like a thread of silver through darkness. Her body responded before her mind could catch up. She knelt beside an overhang of frozen stone where the wind created a pocket of slightly less lethal cold. There, the Philpup was no larger than her fist. Its fur, white as the snow that was slowly burying it, stood matted against its tiny frame. She could see each rib beneath the thin covering, could see the way its flanks rose and fell with the desperate shallow breathing of something not long for this world. Its eyes were still closed, still sealed shut with the blindness of the newborn. Alone. It was alone. The healer understood loneliness the way others understood breathing. She reached forward slowly, letting her shadow fall across the creature first, letting it know presence before contact. The Philpup's body tensed, trembled harder. It tried to burrow deeper into the stone, as if the mountain itself might shelter it. "I see you," she whispered in the old tongue, the language of healers and wild things, not often spoken aloud. "I see you, and you are not forgotten." Her hands moved with the certainty of someone who had mended broken creatures before. She loosened her cloak, the only possession of real value she owned, salvaged from a temple burned 30 years ago, and gathered the Philpup against her chest. The creature's body was ice. She could feel death working at its edges, could sense the shadow in its veins with the clarity that came from her gift. Poison, shadow poison. The kind that didn't just kill, but corrupted, transformed, twisted bone and soul alike. The kind that marked you as chosen or cursed. She did not question why she did what she did next. There was no thought in it, no hesitation. She opened her cloak wider and drew the Philpup inside, pressing it against her skin where her heart still beat with the warmth of the living. Her gift. The one that had made her unpopular in every settlement, every pack that had briefly harbored her, began to flow. Not desperately, not the frantic healing of the untrained, but the deep, bone-patient warmth of true restoration. The kind that required years to master and seconds to drain you empty. She could feel her own heat leaving her body, flowing into this small, broken thing. Her fingers grew numb, her breath came harder, but beneath her ribs, pressed against her heartbeat, the Philpup's breathing began to steady. Its trembling eased. Its tiny body, degree by degree, began to warm. "We survive," she breathed into the white fur, more prayer than promise. "We survive because no one else will keep us alive." The blizzard raged around them. The moon bled red overhead, a light that painted everything the color of wounds. But inside the cloak, within the circle of her arms, a small light grew. Not warmth from fire, not the brutal heat of fever, but the gentle, impossible warmth of a healer's gift given freely to a stranger. She did not sleep. She held the Philpup as the hours turned, as the night stretched toward its end, as her own strength became the line between this creature and oblivion. And somewhere in that frozen darkness, she heard it, a sound like singing, ancient and familiar, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. The shelter of forgotten bonds. The first light was not gold. It was silver, that thin, terrible brightness that comes just before dawn truly breaks, when the world exists suspended between night and resurrection. The healer felt it before she saw it, that shift in the air, the way the wind's fury began to soften its edges. She had learned in all her years of solitude that sunrise was sometimes mercy and sometimes cruelty, depending on what it revealed. She did not move. Her body had become secondary hours ago. She existed now only as vessel, as conduit for the warmth that flowed endlessly from her core into the small creature she held. Her arms had stopped aching. Her fingers had gone beyond numbness into something else, a clarity of cold so complete it became almost peaceful. The healer recognized the signs. She had given much of herself tonight, too much, perhaps, but the Philpup lived. Beneath her cloak, against her breast where her heart still labored against the weight of her gift, she could feel the change. The creature's breathing had deepened, found rhythm. Its small body no longer felt like ice, but like something animate, something that belonged to the living world again. And something else, a steady, inexplicable warmth that was not her own, that radiated from within the Philpup itself like a second heartbeat. Shadow poison did not burn away on its own. She knew this. She had studied it, learned its nature through decades of careful work with the few creatures desperate enough to seek her aid. Shadow poison transformed. It rewrote the very essence of what it touched. The Philpup should have been corrupted by now, twisted into something barely recognizable as wolf. Instead, the healer felt the moment it woke. There was no sudden movement, no startled thrashing. Instead, a slow awareness that bloomed like a bruise through the creature's body. The Philpup's breathing changed. Its small muscles tightened. And then, so carefully, so deliberately, it opened its eyes. They were not the blue-gray of normal wolfborn. They were silver, luminous, ancient. Those eyes, newborn as they were, held in them the weight of centuries. The healer and the Philpup regarded each other across the space of inches. She saw recognition in that gaze, not of her as individual, but of her as kindred, as something other, as one who stood outside the ordered structures of pack and territory and bloodline. "Welcome," she whispered, "to the only pack that will have us." The Philpup made a sound then, not quite a whimper, not quite a growl. It was something between, something that seemed to contain both gratitude and an ancient sorrow. The healer understood. Whatever this creature was, whatever the shadow poison had been trying to make of it, she recognized her own loneliness reflected back at her. They had both been cast adrift. Both had been deemed unworthy of the protective circles of the strong. She began to move then, carefully, aware that her body was trembling, not from cold now, but from the deep depletion of her gift. The sun was rising. She needed to move, needed to find better shelter. The ravine was not safe in daylight, too exposed, too likely to be traveled by hunter or scout. She drew the Philpup closer, felt its small body nestle against her chest, as if it had always belonged there. "Come," she said, beginning to stand. "I know a place, the Temple of the Old Ones, where no one ventures anymore. We can rest there. We can bind our wounds." But even as she turned toward the path that led upward, away from the ravine, she heard it. The sound of running paws. Many of them. The thunder of bodies moving in formation, in unity, in the perfect synchronization of a coordinated pack. The healer's breath caught. She had perhaps a minute, maybe less. She moved toward the overhang, pressing herself and the Philpup back into shadow, hoping against reason that the wind might still carry her scent away, that the running light might obscure her form. The first shape crested the ravine's lip. It was enormous, easily twice her height when it rose to its hind legs. Snow-white, like the Philpup, but marked with the symbols of the royal guard. Armor fashioned from bone and silver hung across its broad back. Behind it came others, 1, 2, 5, 10, more. They moved like a single organism, like a wave of fur and muscle and terrible purpose. This was no hunting party. This was ceremony. This was something meant to intimidate, to overwhelm, to demonstrate the vast gulf between the powerful and the powerless. The pack came to a stop perhaps 20 feet from her hiding place. The leader, the largest, the most heavily marked, raised its massive head and breathed deeply. The healer felt her heart contract with ice. She had been scented. The wind had betrayed her. But the leader was not looking at her. It was looking at the fill-pup in her arms. The poison of shadow and starlight. The transformation happened not in a single moment, but in a cascade of them, each one splintering into the next like cracks spreading through frozen water. The healer felt it through her connection to the fill-pup, through the strange intimacy that had been forged when she had pressed the creature against her heart and given of her own warmth to sustain its life. The fill-pup was changing. Its small body began to shift and expand, but not with the violent rupture of ordinary metamorphosis. Instead, it was as if something ancient inside it was finally opening its eyes. The white fur deepened to the color of fresh cream, then to something approaching silver. The tiny frame lengthened, small paws became large enough to grip stone, and through it all, she felt the shadow poison working, not corrupting but integrating. The darkness was becoming part of the light. The sickness was becoming the source of power. The fill-pup's eyes opened wider, and she saw it then, the moment it truly woke. Not to life, but to purpose. The royal pack's leader made a sound. It was not quite a howl, not quite a roar. It contained both, and something else besides. The other wolves, and there were dozens now, she realized with a shock of clarity, shifted their positions, each one moving with an almost reverential precision toward the growing form of what had been a fill-pup in her arms. The healer understood none of it. But she felt everything. She felt the weight of decades of bloodline politics she had spent her life avoiding. She felt the pressure of ancient prophecies and old magic, the kind that did not concern itself with individual will, but moved like continents, indifferent and vast. She felt the fill-pup's own confusion and terror and wonder, all of it pouring through the connection they shared, like water finding every crack and crevice. And then the leader spoke. Its voice was not human, but neither was it purely animal. It existed in some space between, where the old magic still lingered, and the world had not yet forgotten how to speak in the tongues of creation. "True Luna," it said, and the words carried the weight of ritual, of recognition, of something so significant that even the wind seemed to pause. "You have come." The healer felt the fill-pup stiffen. Through their connection, she sensed the creature's confusion, the profound disorientation of one waking from a dream into a reality that made no sense. The fill-pup, no, not fill-pup anymore, something far larger and more terrible and more magnificent, turned its massive head slowly, as if seeing the pack for the first time. "I did not come," the creature said. And its voice was like that of the leader, but different in subtle ways, younger, more uncertain, more wounded. "I was left to die in the snow." "The shadow poison," another wolf said, a female, marked with the symbols of a high priestess. "It should have destroyed you. Instead," she stepped closer, and the healer had to resist the urge to draw back. But the priestess was not looking at her. Her entire attention was fixed on the creature that had grown from fill-pup to something the size of a large wolf, something that carried in its very presence the weight of transformation and destiny. "The poison has claimed you as their own," the priestess continued. "Look at your flanks." The healer looked. For the first time, she could see clearly what the shadow poison had done. It had not spread across the fill-pup's body in sickly veins, as it did in corrupted creatures. Instead, it had settled into specific patterns, markings that appeared to cover old scars, as if healing what had been broken before the poison ever touched it. The marks formed symbols, ancient and recognizable to anyone who had studied the old languages. The marks of the true Luna. The mark of the one who was meant to bridge the worlds of light and shadow, who would carry in their body the balance between creation and destruction. "This is not possible," the leader said, but the healer heard wonder rather than doubt in its voice. The lineage was broken. The last true Luna fell 3 centuries ago. "The shadow poison seeks them out," the priestess said softly. "It is the mark that calls to the marked. It recognizes its own purpose, and in this creature it found what it could not corrupt, because the creature itself exists in the space between corruption and redemption." The healer realized then what she had done. By giving her warmth to the Philpup, by pressing it against her own heart and lending it her gift, she had not simply saved it. She had claimed it. She had branded it with her own nature, that liminal space of not belonging, of being forever outside the structures of power. And in doing so, she had inadvertently activated something in the creature's blood, something that had been waiting for exactly this kind of connection. The Philpup turned to look at her then, and the healer saw her own understanding reflected in those ancient silver eyes. They were bound now, not by love, though that might come, not by pack loyalty, though that too might grow, but by the simple, terrible truth that they were the only two things in this moment that existed outside the normal order. They were anomalies, miracles, monsters. They were true. The circle of recognition and reckoning. The healer found herself the focus of every eye when the pack recognized the bond between her and the newborn true Luna. She had spent so long invisible that the sudden weight of attention felt like drowning in air. The Royal Guard's soldiers shifted, forming a barrier between her and the treacherous paths that might have offered escape. Not aggressive, not yet, but with the implicit understanding that her departure was no longer a matter of choice. The leader, a massive grey wolf bearing the markings of the High Pack's eldest, stepped forward. His movement was deliberate, formal in a way that suggested ritual rather than threat. Still, the healer's gift pulsed with warning. She had never felt power like this, concentrated and ancient and utterly assured of its own dominion. "Who are you?" the High Pack leader asked. "What healer walks alone without insignia or lineage?" The healer did not answer immediately. She had learned long ago that silence often revealed more than words, and she needed time to understand what was happening. The Philpup, the true Luna, had moved closer to her, its massive form now far larger than her own body. She could feel its uncertainty through their connection, like touching a wound that was still bleeding. "I have no name that matters," she said finally. "I have no lineage to speak of. I am only a healer who understands that those without a pack must create their own ways to survive." "You gave your gift to this creature," the High Priestess said. "It was not a question. The old magic speaks of it. We can feel it in the bond between you, a healer's sacrifice, willingly given. This is no ordinary thing." The healer felt something shift in her chest. The High Priestess was right. She had given of herself, and the gift had woven itself into the Philpup, into the true Luna, in ways that could not be undone. She was marked now as surely as the creature was marked. They carried pieces of each other in their bones. "I did what any being would do," the healer said quietly. "I saw something suffering. I had the power to ease that suffering. To do anything else would be to deny the very purpose of healing." The leader circled her slowly, studying her with eyes that missed nothing. The healer forced herself to remain still, though everything in her wanted to flee. She had spent her life avoiding power, avoiding the structures that governed wolf society. And now she found herself at its very center, bound to something that the highest orders of the royal pack clearly regarded as an omen or a prophecy or something equally impossible to ignore. "You exist outside the laws of pack," the leader said. It was not judgmental, merely observational. "No bond, no territory, no honor debt to claim you. This is rare. In 300 years, such a thing is rare. I am not alone now," the healer said, and she placed her hand on the true Luna's shoulder. The creature's muscles were trembling beneath her fingers, and she could sense its terror through their bond. It was still newborn in all ways that mattered, regardless of its physical transformation. This creature is bound to me now, and I am bound to it. Whatever you believe it to be, understand that it will not be claimed by your structures. It will not be the tool of your power. Silence fell across the circle. The priestess began to shift, to step forward, and the healer thought perhaps she had spoken too boldly. But the leader raised a single paw, commanding stillness. "Tell me," the leader said, and there was something almost like respect in its voice. "What do you know of the true Luna? What has the old magic revealed to a healer without lineage?" The truth was, the healer knew nothing. She had only stumbled upon the Philpup by accident, had given shelter for no reason beyond instinct and the habits of her calling. But she understood power and prophecy well enough to recognize that truth was less important than the shape of truth at this moment. What mattered was finding words that would protect the creature she had already chosen. "I know that it carries the poison that should not have touched it, and yet it did," the healer said carefully. "I know that the shadow and the light have found balance within it, where they should have warred. And I know that whatever destiny you believe it carries, it will choose its own path, not the one laid out by any power, royal or ancient or otherwise." The leader regarded her for a long moment. Then slowly it began to lower its massive form, its great head bowing forward in a gesture that the healer had read in old stories but never witnessed in truth. One by one, the other wolves did the same. 30 of them at least, all sinking to a posture of supplication, all acknowledging in their bodies what the leader had first recognized. The true Luna had come, not as they had expected, not through any structure of power or prophecy fulfilled in orderly succession, but here, emerging from the shadow and the snow, carried by a healer with no name and no allegiance except to the simple fact of another being's suffering. "Then we will follow," the leader said, "and we will accept what the true Luna becomes. The weight of names and destinies thieves." The temple where the healer led them was ancient beyond memory. Its stones were carved with languages that had been dead for centuries, and the ceilings rose into shadows so complete that even the royal pack's most keenly sighted members could not pierce them. It sat on a shelf of mountain, carved out in some distant age when the world had been younger and stranger, before the laws of pack and territory had settled over everything like snow, gradually smoothing the sharp edges of a wilder magic. The true Luna moved through it like a returning ghost. The healer felt this through their bond. Not memories exactly, but the echo of memories, something ancestral and overwhelming. The creature had never been here, not in this lifetime, but some part of it recognized these stones. Some part of it responded to the old magic that lingered in the corners and carved into every surface. "What is this place?" one of the younger wolves asked, its voice small with wonder and fear. "The Temple of the Thresholds," the high priestess whispered, "the place where the Old Ones spoke to the worlds between worlds. It has been sealed for 300 years. Since the last true Luna fell," the leader said. The healer did not correct them. She had begun to understand, through her connection to the true Luna, that this creature was indeed something connected to ancient bloodlines, ancient powers. But the connection was stranger than simple genealogy. It was as if the true Luna contained not the memories of its predecessors, but the echo of all those who had ever existed in that liminal space between corrupted darkness and untouched light. The role of the true Luna was not inherited like territory or rank. It was awakened when something born to the balance chose to claim its own power rather than fleeing from it. She understood this because she had made that choice long ago. She had been born gifted with healing, yes, but also marked, unable to bond with any pack because her gift was too dangerous, too expensive in its demands. She had spent her life running from the truth of what she was. But somewhere in the snow, holding a frozen Philpup against her heart, she had made a different choice. She had accepted her nature as the only thing that mattered, and in that acceptance she had awakened something that had been dormant all her life. The true Luna felt it in her, the completion of a circle that had begun 300 years ago when the last true Luna had apparently been forced to choose between its nature and the demands of the pack structure. "You must be named," the priestess said, approaching both of them. "The true Luna must have a name that carries power, that speaks to what you are meant to become. And you," she turned to the healer, "must be recognized as more than nameless wanderer. You are the one who awakened the crown. You must be given title and place." The healer felt the true Luna's resistance through their bond. The creature did not want names or titles. It wanted what she wanted, anonymity and freedom, and the simple right to exist without the weight of expectation. But the healer also understood that such things were no longer possible. The moment the royal pack had recognized what the Philpup was, the moment the true Luna had been seen, its freedom had become a luxury it could no longer afford. "Then name us," the healer said, and she straightened her shoulders, accepting what was coming. "But understand this. We will carry your names into our own story, not the other way around. We are not vessels for your prophecies. We are ourselves first." The leader's eyes widened slightly, an expression of something like approval. "You are Kess," the priestess said, directing her attention to the true Luna. "The bridge. The one who carries both light and shadow in balance. The one who will speak in the spaces between kingdoms, in the silence where no pack has authority." The true Luna, Kess, made a sound of acceptance, and the healer felt the name settle into the creature's bones, like finding a truth that had always been embedded there. "And you," the priestess continued, turning to the healer, "you are Mora, the keeper of threshold. The one who walks between the wild and the civilized, carrying healing in places where healing should not be possible. You are the anchor that holds Kess to the living world. Without you, the bridge would burn. The balance would collapse. Mora, the healer, now with a name, now with a role she had not chosen but had somehow always been meant to fill, felt the weight of it settle across her shoulders. But beneath the weight she felt something else, something like rightness. For the first time in her life of wandering and solitude, she understood why she had been cursed with her gift. It had not been random misfortune. It had been preparation. She and Kess looked at each other across the ancient stones of the temple. The true Luna's silver eyes held all the confusion and fear of newborn understanding, but beneath it, the healer felt the creature's acceptance. Whatever this was, they were bound in it together. "Then we accept," the healer, Mora, said, "but know that we will choose our own path through this destiny, the price of power and the gift of sacrifice." That night, in the deepest chamber of the temple, Mora finally understood the true nature of the gift she had given to Kess. The true Luna lay on the cold stone floor, its massive body racked with transformations that were both necessary and agonizing. The shadow poison was not leaving Kess's body. It was settling deeper, integrating, becoming part of the creature's essential nature in ways that no normal healing could address. And Mora realized, with a clarity that felt like ice in her chest, that she had not saved the Philpup from this fate. She had simply invited the Philpup to survive it. The royal pack had retreated to the temple's outer chambers, respecting the intimacy of what was occurring between healer and crown. But Mora felt their presence like weight, like expectation, like the vast structure of power that now had its fingers firmly grasped around both their destinies. She knelt beside Kess and placed her hands on the creature's flanks. The true Luna's breathing had become irregular, almost gasping, as the final integration of shadow and light reached its crescendo. Through their bond, Mora felt a moment of absolute panic, the primal fear of an organism being transformed beyond recognition. "Breathe," she whispered, though she knew words would not help. "The pain has purpose. The transformation is not death. It is becoming." She began to sing then. It was something she had not done in decades, not since her childhood in the one pack that had briefly tried to claim her. It was a healing song, an old one, the kind that had been used when creatures had to be broken and remade to survive in a new form. It was not gentle. It did not promise that the pain would cease. Instead, it promised meaning. It promised that on the other side of this agony would be a version of self that was stronger, truer, more completely aligned with the deep magic that lived in earth and bone and blood. Kess's body convulsed. The shadow marks across the creature's flanks burned brilliant silver, and Mora felt the backlash of it through their connection, a burning that made her gasp with empathy pain, though she was not the one undergoing transformation. But she did not break the connection. She held it, held Kess through the worst of it, holding the belief that the true Luna would emerge from this alive. Hours passed. The song changed and evolved, becoming something new as it poured out of her, adapted to Kess's specific agony, to the particular way the shadow poison was reshaping the creature's fundamental nature. And slowly, gradually, Mora began to feel the transformation stabilize. The convulsions eased. Kess's breathing deepened, became less panicked and more controlled. The shadow marks across the creature's flanks stopped burning and settled into patterns that were almost beautiful. Not decoration, but purpose made visible. Scars that had been healed correctly, marks that said, "I have been broken and remade, and I am stronger for it." When Mora finally released her song, she discovered that she could barely move. She had poured so much of herself into that healing, that guidance through transformation, that her body had become hollow. She lay down beside Kess on the cold stone, and the true Luna, awake now, more aware now than it had been, more completely integrated into its own power, shifted its weight to shelter the healer with its bulk. They lay like that as dawn approached. Two creatures outside the normal order, bound by sacrifice and choice rather than bloodline or hierarchy. And in that moment, as the first rays of light began to touch the temple's highest stones, Mora understood what the priestess had truly meant when she said that Mora was the anchor holding Kess to the living world. She was not Kess's servant. She was not Kess's guide. She was Kess's mirror. They reflected each other's nature. They held each other accountable to their own purpose. And in that reflection, both of them found the strength to become what they had been born to become. "I cannot protect you from what comes next," Mora said softly into Kess's fur. "The royal pack will want to use you. Other powers will want to control you. And you will have to choose, again and again, whether you belong to the stories they want to tell, or whether you belong to yourself." Kess made a sound that was almost like agreement, and Mora felt the true Luna's acknowledgement through their bond. The creature understood. Already, it understood more than most beings twice its age, because the shadow poison had given Kess access to all the knowledge of every true Luna that had come before, every one that had been awakened and then either broken or sacrificed, or rarely found their own path to freedom. "Then we choose together," Kess said. Its voice was stronger now, more certain. "Whatever comes, we choose together. The breaking and the becoming." The royal pack wanted to train Kess. They wanted to refine the true Luna into a weapon that could be wielded in their ongoing territorial disputes, their slow wars against other kingdoms that never quite erupted into open conflict but simmered constantly like poison in water. Mora felt their expectations like hands trying to reshape stone. She refused. It started small. When the priestess requested that Kess spend time learning the structures and hierarchies of the royal court, Mora suggested instead that the true Luna needed time simply being alive, learning what it meant to exist in this body, in this form. When the leader wanted to take Kess on territorial patrols to demonstrate the creature's power to potential enemies, Mora found reasons why such ventures should wait. The tension built like a storm. "You act as though you have authority here," the priestess said one afternoon, her voice cold with contained anger. You are the keeper of threshold, yes, but the true Luna is the crown. Surely you understand that the crown's purpose supersedes individual desire. Mora stood in the temple's great hall, the high ceiling above her creating echoes that amplified her words as she spoke. The true Luna's purpose is precisely that. Its own purpose, Mora said. Not yours, not the royal pack's, not any external powers. And I will oppose anyone who tries to reduce it to anything less than the full complexity of what it is. Kes stood beside her, and the healer felt the creature's uncertainty through their bond. The true Luna was still learning what it meant to be itself, to have desires and needs that were separate from the vast machinery of fate and bloodline. But Mora felt the creature's trust in her, and she held on to that as the priestess's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "Then you are a threat to the order we have maintained," the priestess said quietly. "Perhaps," Mora agreed, "but I am a threat to an order that would consume a young being before it had time to understand what it was supposed to consume." That night, Kes and Mora left the temple. They did not ask permission. They did not announce their departure or leave messages. They simply waited until the royal pack had settled into sleep, and then they walked down the mountain paths that Mora had learned in her years of isolation. The true Luna followed, and the healer felt through their bond that this was the first time Kes had done anything truly of its own volition, the first time the creature had chosen a path that was not guided by others' expectations. The royal pack tried to follow, but they had not counted on the fact that Mora knew the wilderness in ways they did not. She had spent 3 decades learning the secret paths, the hidden waterholes, the temporary shelters that existed in the margins of mapped territory. She led Kes through terrain that was as dangerous to the civilized as it was safe to the wild at heart. Behind them, the pack's howls grew fainter. Eventually, they ceased entirely. They walked for weeks, Mora and Kes, 2 creatures existing in the space between the ordered and the chaotic. And slowly, the true Luna began to understand what it meant to be free from expectation. In the wild places, Kes's shadow poison became not a mark of special destiny, but simply part of its nature. The creature could run without purpose, rest without the weight of prophecy, be young in ways that no royal court would ever allow. But the freedom was incomplete. Mora felt it through their bond, the way Kes still yearned for purpose, still felt the pull of the bloodline knowledge embedded in the creature's bones. The shadow poison carried within it the experiences of every true Luna that had come before, and most of them had been broken, trying to reconcile their own desires with the vast weight of what they were meant to be. One night, as they rested in a valley hidden by mist and old-growth forest, Mora made a decision. "You need to go back," she said. Kes's eyes widened. "Back to the temple? Back to the royal pack?" "Not to them," Mora clarified, "but to the choices. You cannot grow into what you are meant to become by running from it. You can only grow by facing it and choosing again and again what you will allow to define you." Through their bond, Mora felt Kes's pain. The creature understood the wisdom in her words but did not want to accept it. They had only recently become themselves. The idea of returning to the place of pressure and expectation felt like betrayal. "I will go with you," Mora said, "not as a servant of the order, but as your reflection. Whenever they try to tell you what you must be, I will remind you that you are the one who decides. You are the bridge between light and shadow, and that bridge stands or falls based on what you choose." Kes pressed its massive head against Mora's shoulder. The true Luna was accepting that growth was not comfort. It was the willingness to walk into the fire of your own nature and come out transformed on the other side. The 30 who bowed, and the dawn that follows. They returned to the temple as the first snow of a new winter began to fall. It was not a surrender. It was an arrival, purposeful and intentional and full of the kind of quiet power that comes from choosing one's own fate rather than having it thrust upon you. The royal pack was waiting. 30 of them stood arrayed in the temple's great hall, and Mora recognized in that number the echo of the priestess's message all those months ago. 30 lobos se curvaram para a desconocida. 30 wolves who would bow to the true Luna and to the one who had awakened it. But this time their bowing held different meaning. "We have debated," the leader said, stepping forward, "about what the true Luna should be. We have argued about how the crown should be wielded, what purposes it should serve. We have made the mistake of treating you as a tool rather than as an equal." Kess regarded the leader with eyes that were no longer confused or young. The true Luna had spent months learning to simply exist, and that education had made the creature more fully realized than any amount of royal tutelage could have managed. "I will not be your crown," Kess said, and the words carried the weight of a covenant. "I will not lead your battles or command your territories, but I will show you what it means to exist in the spaces between, to hold multiple truths simultaneously, to find power not in domination, but in balance." The leader bowed, and the action was not submission, but recognition. One by one, the 30 wolves lowered themselves in acknowledgement of something that had nothing to do with hierarchy and everything to do with respect for a being that had chosen its own path. When the sun rose the next morning, it painted the snow gold and silver, colors that echoed the marks running across Kess's flanks, the scars that spoke of poison integrated and transformed into power. Mora stood at the temple's entrance, watching the light break across the landscape, and she felt the weight of her own role settle fully into place. She was no longer the nameless healer. She was Mora, keeper of thresholds. And in that keeping, she had discovered her purpose, not to rule, not to lead, but to stand beside those who existed in the liminal spaces and remind them that such spaces were not exile. They were sanctuary. They were the only places where true transformation could occur. Kess joined her at the entrance, the true Luna's massive form moving with grace that only came from complete self-acceptance. The creature was still young in years, still learning what the shadow poison could teach, still discovering the depths of its own nature. But it was no longer alone. It had never been alone from that first moment in the blizzard when Mora had given her warmth to keep it alive. "Thank you," Kess said quietly. "For what?" Mora asked. "For choosing me," Kess said. "For seeing me first as something that needed saving, then as something that needed freedom, then as something that could choose for itself. You showed me that survival is not the same as living, and living is not the same as choosing." Mora reached out and placed her hand on Kess's head, a gesture not of dominance, but of kinship, of two creatures who had found in each other's wilderness the seeds of transformation. The shadow poison had marked them both now. The light had claimed them both. And in that balance, in that refusal to be only one thing, they had found a kind of power that no royal court could ever take away. The 30 wolves emerged from the temple. One by one, they bowed once more, not to the crown but to the principle that the crown represented, the willingness to bridge worlds, to hold paradox, to refuse definition. They understood now what the priestess had tried to explain. The true Luna was not a ruler. It was a teacher, a witness, a living reminder that the most profound power came not from hierarchy, but from the choice to remain yourself, even when the world demanded you become something else. As the day grew bright and the snow began to fall again, Mora and Kess looked out over the landscape, the wild places and the ordered territories, the spaces where kingdoms tried to assert control, and the margins where such control had never reached. They were of both. They belonged to neither. And in that essential liminality, they had finally found home.